Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, it's Django here. Today I thought it would be cool for us to take a look at Surge by Vember Audio. This is an open source and completely free VST plugin. I think it's a really cool synth. It almost rivals plugins like FM8 in terms of its FM capabilities, for example. And it also has wavetables. I've loaded it up here in Reaper. I've loaded the VST3 version. This is an initial patch. So, Surge is broken up into two scenes, scene A and scene B. So now I've selected a different oscillator here just to demonstrate that if we switch to B, you get 3 more oscillators. So yeah, 6 oscillators in total, and you can either use a single scene. So right now we're hearing A, and if I click on B, now we're hearing B. Or you can have them split across the keyboard, and you can set a split key over here. So you could have like a different sound for bass and a different side for your sort of keys at the top. Or we could have them dual. Now we're hearing the saw and the sine. But for now, let's just have a look at a single scene. So I'm going to go back to A. Now on this little mixer here, you can see we've got volume for each oscillator. There, the others are muted at the moment. You can solo. That's oscillator B, for example, or have them both together. The one sort of limitation that kind of bums me out is that you can only pan the whole scene. You can't pan individual oscillators. I'd like to be able to make a supersaw and like pan each of these 3 sort of to varying degrees on the left, and then these 3 on varying degrees to the right. But that doesn't seem to be possible. Nonetheless, there are still a lot of things you can do per scene. And you could just pan one scene left and one scene right, and then duplicate the plugin perhaps to get something in the center image. So that's one thing about it. Another thing, before I carry on, I should point out, if you go into this menu at the bottom right corner, you can change the zoom. So this is the normal zoom, and I prefer it a bit bigger. So I went to 125. And then if you go in there again, you'll see you can set this current zoom level as your default. You'll also notice there's controls here for MPE, and in the presets, there are MPE, like there's a bank of MPE presets, not very many. I suppose there'll be more in the future. This is now an open source plugin. So let's carry on with this little tour though. Right now, we're just looking at a sine wave oscillator. Let's mute oscillator 2. There's a noise oscillator, and you can change the noise color over here. You can high pass this whole oscillator. It goes up to 1000 hertz. So that's quite a nice handy sort of global high pass if you maybe want to have your sub on B and make some sort of a crazy bass sound on A and have them not compete with each other frequency wise. I find that quite handy because it's separate from your filters. There's so much stuff in here. So we're looking at a sine wave. If you click on this drop down, you'll see we've got sort of a sawtooth with quite a lot of modulation parameters. There's a sort of a sub oscillator. There's sync. Here's the sub oscillator. We're also hearing the noise still. Now we're just hearing oscillator 1. We have wavetable. So here this becomes a morph. And there are lots of different wavetables, sort of synthetic ones, sampled ones, Waldorf ones, which I find some of these are lovely. I don't remember what I was playing with last night, but there's some cool ones. So now, let's say we want to modulate this morph parameter, for example. Down here, you can see we have a ton of LFOs, 6 LFOs, and then it looks like we have, I'm not sure what SLFO, I think what the SLFOs are not per note. So I think these first ones, you can have different LFO per note. So If we click on it once, it just shows us the LFO. So let's change the rate, and then I click on another one. You can see it's showing a different LFO at the bottom here. And if we click on the button again, it flashes green, and you'll notice all the sliders that were white have gone blue. And this means we can modulate these it's now a ghost slider. So if I move this blue slider, you'll see there's where the original white one was. And now this LFO is going to go up to this point and below by the same amount. If we want it to be unipolar, you click on over here. So let's first just hear it. So it doesn't sound sort of smooth because it's trying to go below 0 effectively. So if I click on unipolar, it's now just going between the two knobs. So if I click it again, the blue sort of ghost one goes away, but it's still modulating it. So here is a sort of global amplifier envelope. So yeah, back to the oscillators. Aside from Wavetable, as you saw earlier, there's Sine. There are two different FM algorithms. So right now, this modulation is still happening over there. It's now affecting the modulator 1 FM amount. And you can change the modulator 1 ratio. So just in one oscillator, we've got two different sort of FM modulators. And these LFOs are extremely powerful. So firstly, you've got an envelope for the LFO, so we can sort of make it fade in with the attack. What you can also do though, well, firstly you can morph the shape of the LFO, and you can also, other than different shapes here, you can also go to a step sequencer mode where you sort of draw in steps. We can change the loop points, so let's make it like a triplet thing. So that's pretty cool. There's also a simple envelope. So all of these can be envelopes if you like. So now this is just an envelope. So I turn down the sustain. Now, where things get quite crazy is this is now one FM oscillator. And there's also this entire oscillator FM section. So we can have, like over here, oscillator 2 modulating oscillator 1. So now if we go to oscillator 2, let's make it something more FM friendly, like a sine wave. So as if there weren't enough modulations just in this oscillator, we've got 2 more. So already this is like a seriously powerful FM synth. You can't really look at it like 3 operators because you've also got these modulators within each one. Effectively, it's like almost like 6 operators as an FM synth. So very powerful. And on top of that, we have filters. So at the moment, they're running in series from one filter into another. I think it goes into, is that the wave shaper, I think. Yeah, so it goes through filter 1, then a wave shaper, then filter 2. And that high pass we were talking about, I guess, is at the end. I could be wrong on that. Then we've got different things. For example, you can do a filter feedback thing, which I haven't played around with yet, but that sounds quite interesting. And there are various different configurations, routings for the filters. And you can also have oscillator 3 modulating 2, modulating 1 for more FM craziness. And yeah, so there's various different routings for the FM and for the filters. There are effects. So right now it says here, A insert 1. If you look at this little diagram, So there is a insert 2. Here is a send, FX1 send, and you can see you can dial it in over here. I tried to modulate this with an LFO, the send amount, and it didn't let me, which is a bummer, but that's all good. Then you've got master effect slots as well. Some of these effects are quite cool. Like I really like the ping pong delay. Let's go ping pong eighths and turn up FX1 send. And rather than the feedback is down, but this, what does it say? Cross feedback. It seems to be maybe what causes the ping pong effect. That is the parameter they're using here. It's got a nice sort of tape style. This isn't the brightest sound. That's brighter. You can hear it sort of doing a low cut. If you change the delay times, it has a nice wonky effect. Sort of a classic tape delay kind of sound. So yeah, definitely something to have some fun with. The other thing is, you can see right now it's talking in seconds, but if you right click most of the sliders, you can tempo sync them. The same applies for these, your ADSR, so you can like make a delay before your first attack of like 1/16th note or something, and then have the sound attack. In fact, I'll show you that now. I'm going to turn off this delay send and dull the sound a bit. And we were using LFO1 over here. So let's make this delay tempo synced. And 2 12th notes. 4 64th notes, that's basically a 16th note. I don't know why they worded like that, because the next option down is a third of a 16th note, or 1.3 16th notes. So 4 64ths, that's a 16th note. If you listen to our tempo, you'll hear that it is in sync. So I made a sound last night where I made each of these envelopes with different delay amounts. So I sort of created a step sequence with variable curves, because now you can change the curve like that, the decay rather, and then you can morph the shape using this deform slider here. So you can sort of turn it to a more logarithmic, I suppose, curve, more sort of rounded or quicker. So very powerful modulation section. You can also, as you can see, you can modulate things with velocity. And if you click on it, you'll notice these knobs do go blue. So you can change your LFO speed with key tracking, for example, which I'll show you in a sound just now. There was another sound I made last night with that. There's a reverb. It's sort of a kind of plate sounding, almost metallic sounding reverb. It can have its uses. It's not my favorite, but I think for certain sounds it'll be quite nice. Sounds nice on this. Perhaps we modulate that noise level with this LFO. So on this sound, this reverb sounds quite nice. This wave shaper is pretty cool as well. Let's take off this reverb. Maybe I will modulate that FM amount as well. Your LFO rate, by the way, if you do have it as an LFO, can also be tempo synced over there. So that's pretty cool. So here is your pitch bend, mod wheel modulation. You can use the amp envelope and filter envelopes as well as all these LFOs to modulate other things if you so wish. Cool. So yeah, I think that's a pretty good overview of this. It's not the most detailed overview, but it is a great Sadowik video that you can check out where he goes into each sort of component of this in more detail. So for now, let's have a look at a track I made using Surge last night. So here is this track. It's only 2 minutes so far. I might flesh it out further. I wanted to create some risers and stuff for it, but I was up very late, so I eventually said nope. So here it is from the top. So basically all the sounds in this track were made in Surge except the tambourine and a hi-hat. So let's have a look at some of these sounds, starting with this pad at the top. So actually, let's go chronologically. So the first sound that I started with was this bass sound. Ooh, I'm on a strange octave. Okay, start at the top. So, firstly, I just found this crush bass preset, and this kind of inspired the track. Often I'll get ideas from presets that I wouldn't have otherwise got, so I really don't have anything against using them. I added this reverb. Let's turn off the reverb and the EQ. So that's sort of how it sounded. It's kind of quite mono, and the first thing I did was throw on a reverb. And then as the track developed, I high-passed it and added a sub layer, which is just a sine wave at a fairly low octave, just a simple sine wave sub. And then I high-passed said sub a little bit, and I think there was still a lot of bass. So you can see I've sort of rolled off some of the highs. And then this reverb, you'll see, is a big reverb, but the dry wet is down. And I just used it in the intro. I have the reverb all the way wet, this reverb. The dry wet here, you'll see, is busy being automated. It's busy moving. So that's fading, like it started sort of in the distance, and then as the sound gets closer, take this reverb off, and we're left with this reverb on the initial bass sound, and then that bass sound is highest passed, and then there's surge with the sub. The other thing you can probably hear is the sub is sort of pulsating. That's due to the sidechain compression. Now, if you watched my previous video on routing sound in Reaper, you'll recognize this 3-band splitter. So what I've done here is split the lows onto 1 and 2, and the highs and mids onto 5 and 6. So this sidechain compressor is just affecting the low band now. So I'm ducking the sort of sub without affecting the sound, the rest of the sound. You sort of hardly hear the ducking there, but when the sub comes in, you'll hear it more prominently. So it's just affecting the low band. And then here's the band joiner. It's receiving 1 and 2, which is our bass, and 5 and 6, which is my highs and mids, and spitting them back out onto the stereo pair that we can hear. So if I turn this down, that was our sub. That's now ducking with this sidechain compression. So yeah, that's this rather large effects chain in a nutshell. That's my bass. And I've automated basically what I did. Let's widen this track a little bit. What I did was automate my mod wheel and pitch bend. The other sound I made was this, sort of a Supersaw type thing. So I've noticed surge glitches out when parameters are being automated on screen. So if I don't have the plugin visible, it's going to play fine. And if I have it visible and I play automation, it seems to struggle. So this is not without its bugs, this plugin, unfortunately. But anyway, here is this Supersaw. I believe I have no effects on here. So the reverb is my own reverb send to this air reverb. If we turn it off. So yeah, that's just a sort of a big reverb. And I have mapped the attack. So if I click on this, you'll see the filter attack for B and for A are being modulated by this sort of macro knob. That's another thing I forgot to mention. These 8 things here are macro controls. So if you right click it, it says control 2, control 1, and you can assign them a CC, MIDI CC, which I did to automate it, and then I automated it here. CC2 was what I assigned to the attack here. So you can clear it, currently CC2. I'm going to leave that in place. And then, yeah, so I just automated that MIDI because I couldn't find the control. Like if I move it here, it says in last touched, no recently touched parameters. So for some reason that doesn't work. So I just assigned it a CC value. So this Supersaw consists of 2 banks. So if we solo just this first bank, it is a Supersaw panned hard left, and the attack is being modulated by this macro knob. So there's 8 of these macro slots. And the same goes for B. B is just the same saw panned left, and this filter attack is also being modulated by the macro. Together they make this. I had to basically make each change I made on A, I had to replicate on B. So I had the filter, and then a filter cutoff setting, and modulation. I think with this filter envelope is controlling the cutoff. And I basically just replicated each change I made on bank B to create sort of a wide panned saw wave. Here is unison. So there's a unison pitch spread and a unison count. So we've got 3 voices of unison per bank. So it's the same on this bank. 3 voices, but it doesn't have a pan control for the unison, which is a shame. And it would make up for it if I could go into each oscillator and pan them slightly differently, and then I could like make a really big saw. But the oscillators don't seem to be individually pannable, unfortunately. Cool, so that's this sound here. There's our attack being automated for that first note. And then the mod wheel was just adding vibrato. So this lead sound was when the track really started coming together. I have this epic delay here on the master with the dry wet dialed down a bit. And the cross mod, so the preset I used was the ping pong 8th notes, and then I just increased the cross mod a bit. I think it's a very nice delay. And by the way, you can route audio in using this audio input. So you can do left, right, or stereo. So you could actually process other sounds with the wave shaper and delay or reverb or chorus. You'll see here in Reaper the inputs. So this can work as an input, sort of an effect, or an instrument as you like. So that's pretty cool. This sound was, I think, yeah, it's just single mode. So it's just bank scene A. The velocity is affecting the sort of gain. And it's also affecting the filter envelope amount per note. So if I hit softer, it's doing less filter envelope, and if I press harder, it does more of a change to the filter. So now the mod wheel is doing vibrato. So I've got mod wheel assigned to, we're looking at LFO 2 right now. I've got it assigned to the magnitude. So the magnitude is kind of how much of this LFO, it's kind of a nice global control for how much of the LFO is going to whatever it's mapped to. LFO 2 is routed to the pitch of this whole scene, and it's bipolar, which means it's going up here and to the same amount below this white slider, which is in the center. So we're getting pitch bend in theory. In practice, the magnitude is down. And if we go into the mod wheel is modulating the magnitude. So when I move the mod wheel up, it's effectively bringing this magnitude up. And then I have the mod wheel automated over here to create the sort of pitch bent lead effect. And yeah, I love that delay, man. What else is there? So yeah, most of the synth movement is those three sounds: the bass, the supersaw, and the lead. And then at some point, this pad comes in. And you can see I'm automating the cutoff. So let's have a look at this sound. The ping pong delay this time isn't actually surges. This is my own redelay ping pong effect. So you'll notice when I play, let's look at the LFO and key tracking. So on this sound, the key track is modulating LFO to rate. So the higher I play, the faster the LFO. So that's how we get this sort of changing LFO per note. And the notes, when they overlap, these LFOs are per note. So when they're playing at the same time, you can hear they're all running at different speeds. It's quite a cool effect. I do that in Serum quite a bit as well. And then the cutoff was just being manually automated directly in Reaper. So that's one of the few times some of these sliders, when you move them, you see it in last touched F1 resonance. And then like the macros, for some reason, you don't see under last touched. I think they are in automation. If you see here C, these are actually the macros. That should say control, it just says C for some reason. The issue I had, which I thought was an issue with that, but it's actually not. An issue I had was if I drew any straight lines. I mean, this isn't really a straight line, but it seems to be straight enough that Surge wouldn't read it actually. So don't do that. Just sort of, if you make your automation a little bit smoother, I'm sure even up to, I haven't tested how high you can go in resolution, but for whatever reason, it doesn't seem to like sort of straight line up or down automation. That's why I sort of had various movements between notes just to make sure that it got back, reset the automation value or something, and didn't jump too suddenly at all. Yeah, that was something I learned along the way. So that's the sound. The oscillator here is one of the Waldorf wavetables. What does it say? Patch wavetable. Yeah, so this was, I'm not sure which one, but it was one of the Waldorf wavetables. There are a lot of cool sounding ones in there. And then this LFO that we saw, the rate was being modulated. This LFO is going to the filter cutoff, as well as the morph, I think, or not. Oh, this one is LFO 2 is a more gradual, slow LFO. It is an LFO, it's just very, very slow. In fact, I think it's tempo synced. It was to 2 bars or to 4 bars, and it is modulating this morph parameter. So yeah, there's all sorts of different sort of shapes within this wavetable. Cool, so that is the pad. And then I think I just high passed it in ReEQ. Let's take a look at the drums. So I actually started with this sound as the sort of first drum sound I made. I was trying to leave the sort of main drums for later, just so they didn't distract me when I was working on the melodies and stuff. So what we have here, if I turn off my chorus and re-cue, it sounds like this. And what this is mostly noise automation. So if we go to LFO 1, okay, so this is an interesting patch. This is where I used different delay times for each LFO as an envelope. So you can see they're sort of in different stages along the way, and basically each delay time, each gap here is tempo synced. So if I hold this down, okay, that one's in seconds because I think I got it to, I used the tempo sync. So there's 2/16 notes, so that's an 8th note. And I think for this one, I did sort of 1/16, and then I changed it, I turned off tempo sync and got it to a more fine value, just to sort of add a bit of swing to the offbeat notes, basically, the offbeat envelopes. And then each of these envelopes is modulating the gain for, this is basically for the whole mixer. So I had the gain down, and then it's doing volume automation. So if I hold down the note, it does the sequence, which is going through these different timed LFOs, and each of them are modulating the gain and the filter cutoff and the pitch in some cases of the scene. So although it's not very audible, this is being distorted as well in the wave shaper. Another Waldorf oscillator was sort of quite soft, combined with the noise. So yeah, each of these was modulating the pitch of the scene for this oscillator, as well as the filter and the gain for the whole mixer at large. So yeah, interesting rhythmic patch that I made. And then I added chorus and EQ to take out some of the lows and widen it a little bit more. The other thing in here is I have an insert effect, which was this rotary effect. Sort of a rotary speaker effect, kind of for organs and things. But the this horn rate, I actually tempo synced to 2 bars. So that's what's giving it some of its movement as well, is this rotary effect. Firstly, it's being sent to my short reverb. If I turn that off, it sounds like this. And if we go inside it, what I did was I made LFO 1 into an envelope. So the one thing I did here is I moved the pitch down. Let's turn off the modulation. See what it says. So I brought the pitch down 7 semitones there and another 7 semitones there. And the reason I did that was so that I could modulate the pitch more broadly, basically. So if it was from here to there, it would have only been 7 semitones of pitch jump. And with this set up between the scene pitch and the oscillator pitch, we've got 14 semitones of pitch bend. So I basically need to remember that this note is 14 semitones down from whatever I'm playing. So yeah, that was pitch bend. And I think it also controls, it controls a bit of noise volume as well. So without the noise, then there's no filtering going on by the looks of it. There's a little bit of high passing, funnily enough, at 22 Hertz, so just getting out the very, very low rumbles. and then no wavetable, but there is distortion over here on insert 1. Without the distortion, it sounds like this. Still nice. I think I did tweak some of the settings, but I don't know this well enough to tell you what I did. And then over here, I just EQ'd out some of the lows. And yeah, that's the kick plus the reverb. The reverb, I believe, is high passed, yeah. So the reverb isn't affecting the low end too much. Let's have a look at this sound. So this was a snare I made without the low pass, without the reverb send. Now, what's happening here is this LFO1 is also an envelope. I've used the deform to sort of change its shape curve a little bit, and it is modulating oscillator 1's volume. So that was just a sine wave, and it's getting a little bit of, actually getting quite a lot of wave shaping, sort of on the hard mode wave shaping. If I turn that off, it's quite a lot softer actually. So it's basically a distorted sine wave plus some noise. And I think the noise color is still centered, but I may have used, okay, so I've modulated the noise volume by LFO1, which is an envelope, as well as LFO2, which is also an envelope, except the sustain is down a bit. So it's basically playing it sort of with an initial transient, but it keeps the level of the sound up a little bit afterwards, as long as the envelope. So if I hold a note, combine that with, oh, and there's also filtering going on. So without the filter, it's just noise. With the filter, it's got a bit of character. It's also got the wave shaping happening to it. Combine that with this sine wave. And the high pass. And the reverb. And here I have was initially going to be a hat, but then it became more like a shaker. So if I mute the reverb again, it's all going to the same sort of short reverb, this air verb here. Same reverb you get in Pro Tools. So if I play this key, something else that's weird about Surge, when I play full velocity, it often plays the notes softer. And I think it's something to do with this one gain slider, but I haven't quite worked it out. So yeah, this is just a noise. I think I've got a little bit of filtering just to take off some of the brightness. It's subtle, but I think I did more to it over here. Yeah, I took out some more brightness over here and some of the lows. So without this EQ and without the filter, basically you can now hear the filter more clearly. Just taming some of the highs, and then I tamed them further with this EQ. Just sort of putting it in a space. There's also this reverb. Oh, but it was on a send, and it doesn't look like... Oh no, it's on an insert. But the mix is down, yeah. So I tried this reverb. Let's have a listen to it. You can sort of see what I mean about it sounding platish. It's got a sort of metallic character. It's not bad though. I'm sure I'll find interesting uses for it for sure. So yeah, this was basically just a simple noise sound. You can see here I've soloed the white noise, and then it's pretty much just the decay amp envelope. So if I have sustain, it would sound like that. But I had that down, and the main part of it is just how I played it. Very simple. Got a bit of swing here, strength 24. So if you move the swing slider in Reaper, you get different sort of swing that you can draw in manually or quantize using this quantize window using the grid. So that's quite a handy MIDI feature. And then for the velocities, I think I mapped, yeah, velocity is mapped to this gain parameter in the amp envelope. Cool. And lastly, here's the clap. Once again, I've sent it to my short verb. And I've also widened it with this oh no, this is a distortion. So without the distortion, it sounds like that. It adds a bit of grit. Without the EQ, there's a bit more low end there than I would like. So I just took some of the low end out. Okay, so there are several different components to this clap. If we solo scene A, I've got this oscillator. It's all, you can hear it also getting distorted. So if we turn the distortion off, it sounds like that. It sounds sort of like a noise source, but it isn't. I think it's got some modulation on it. Yes, so this sine wave has some rather fast pitch modulation going on. And then it's also being filtered. So without the filter, not a huge difference actually. And then there's a noise layer. And this noise layer, it also has the LFO on it. So if I slow the LFO down, you can sort of see the shape. It kind of sounds like a few hands clapping in a sort of rather digital way. The deform is creating sort of a longer sustain per LFO. The shape I've got here is ramp. The other thing happening to the noise is LFO 2 is actually modulating the whole scene's pan. And yeah, it's bipolar, so it's going left and right by this amount. So what I kind of did was the speed, I think, was around 35 point something. So what I did was try to go roughly half that. So it was roughly 16 point something or just under. So that each sort of clap, you could call these claps, and then each clap was being panned, was the sort of theory behind my method. And then together they sound like that. And then B was another noise layer being filtered, and that sort of adds some body to the clap. So with the two together, it sounds like this. With the distortion, add some dirt, and then the reverb. So that was the clap. Once again, all together, minus the samples. Pretty cool synth drum kit. I'm quite pleased with this actually. So the snare was played in and then sort of quantized, not 100%. And then the only samples I used were a tambourine loop, which I just chopped out because it had a transient. which I didn't really want, so I replaced it with another hit. And then duplicated that across. So that's the one sample I used, and the other sample is just a hi-hat. And the drums all together. And in the mix. Cool, thanks for watching, and happy music making. I believe in you.